Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our first attempt at doing these online meetings with the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, for the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. But first, before we get into our usual routine of beginning with a prayer and beginning our discussion/talk, we wanted to just briefly touch on some of the reasons why we are deciding to use this medium, this platform, as we all are aware of what's going on in the world right now. We know we live in a planet of transitions, challenges. So we know that there is this virus going around, this coronavirus that's going around right now. So we want to make sure in abundance of caution that we are protecting our community, but also utilizing what resources we have to continue to spread this beautiful message of Spiritism, to reach out to those who are in need, to comfort hearts and souls, because ultimately, no matter what, that is our goal, and that is what we hope to continue to do, regardless of what barriers are placed in our way. Thank God, with modern society, we have all these amazing technological advances where we can, in the comfort of our own home, log on and listen to and partake in the beauty of these types of meetings. So we would like to say that we are adhering to the Center for Disease Control's recommendations, the World Health Organization's recommendations. Of course, we've already been in contact with those in our community, urging people to follow those recommendations, but also from a Spiritist perspective, we wanted to remind ourselves, our community, and one another the importance of maintaining faith, maintaining calm, maintaining just allowing yourself to exude love and kindness towards others, not to allow yourself to get caught up in the fear and pandemonium of all that which is going on right now, because sometimes the psychosphere can shift because of all the negative emotions that are going on, vibrations, because of the fear that's in the atmosphere. So it's important for us to continue to tap into our higher spirituality, our higher selves, our guardian angels, our spirit guides, and we continue to have our connection with God, our prayers at home, our studies, and continue to allow ourselves to be connected with God, because we know that nothing happens by chance, that God and the good spirits and their divine wisdom allow things to happen for a reason. So if we can just take this opportunity, like any other opportunity in the world where we experience something that's challenging or difficult, and take the time to self-reflect and use it as an opportunity for personal growth, but also as a reminder of our own immortality and a reminder of why we're really here on this planet Earth. So without further ado, I would ask that you join me in prayer at this moment. We open up our study this evening, our talk, rather. So for those of you who are watching over the web, I do encourage you to go ahead and close your eyes, but if you are driving, obviously do not do that. But if you would like, you can take this moment to close your eyes, take a deep breath in and out. Let us give thanks for this moment to our great Creator, our Father, Mother God. We thank our mentors, our guides, for inspiring us and encouraging us to continue on the spread of these teachings. We ask, dear Heavenly Father, our spirit guides, that our message, that the message of Spiritism through these teachings may console many hearts that are listening now on the web, the recorded version, are those who are currently in the spirit realm, witnessing tonight's presentation. We ask for your inspiration to be the vessel of light and love, and the messages from our dear sister Joanna DeAngelis. May you bless all those that are watching in both realms of life and bring them peace, serenity, and balance. We thank you in Jesus' name, and so be it. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us with this opening prayer. Bear with us for any technical difficulties that may arise, for this is our first time transmitting through this medium in this way. So bear with us. So for those of you who have been following us along for some weeks now, you know that we have been studying this particular book called Jesus in Our Days. It's psychographed by the medium, Givaldo Franco, by the spirit, Joanna DeAngelis. We are on chapter 13, which is entitled Jesus and Revolution. Now, this particular book, which we always highly recommend people go out and purchase, whether at your local Spiritus Center or online at different Spiritus bookstores. It's an excellent book, not only to study, have on your bedside table, but it will definitely enrich your life. If you haven't already done so, we highly recommend you watch the previous recorded versions from the other chapters, just to get an idea and a grasp and understanding of the previous chapters as well. But independent, if you've never watched any of our videos before, that's entirely okay. You can go ahead and just jump in and watch this video, and each individual message is beautiful in and of itself. So when we talk about Jesus and revolution, excuse me, true to every presentation we have given, we always try to define when Joanna is talking about a particular topic for each chapter. It's either Jesus and revolution, Jesus and challenges, Jesus and reincarnation, Jesus and humanity, Jesus and love, and so forth and so on, are the different titles of her chapters. So we like to define the actual topic that she's bringing to us. So the word revolution itself has many different meanings, but for the intents and purposes of our presentation today, the definitions that we are going to be utilizing from Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the definition: a sudden, radical, or complete change, a fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something, or a change of paradigm. So this particular definition is what Joanna is the point of view that Joanna is coming from when we're studying this particular chapter. She's talking about how our relationship with Jesus can revolutionize, can create this paradigm shift within us, and should within us, and we can go through this radical change. We can look at examples such as the story behind Saul, who became Paul, and his radical change, and many different other followers of Jesus who went through a very radical change. We can read a lot about those different stories through Paul and Stephen, or any of the books of Madre Louise, or the book series with Chico Xavier and Emmanuel. You could see a lot of these examples given throughout history of people who decided to change their lives. So let's go ahead and jump in to some things. Now there's a really good book that came out many, many years ago. It's entitled Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived by Dr. Mark W. Baker. Now we're bringing a particular snippet from this particular book to sort of bring to us this idea of how our thoughts can be revolutionized and how our perspectives can be changed. You know, in life, we go through peaks and valleys. What is that? You know, we go through highs and we go through lows. And we read something in this particular book that really is going to help us to establish a sort of backbone of today's presentation. And we'll get more into that as we begin this dialogue together. But let me share the story that Dr. Baker shares in this book. At one point, Dr. Baker shares in the book in the very beginning how in his own personal life he had struggled with the common question that a lot of people ask themselves, that why am I going through this? Why is God allowing? What is the purpose in all this? And he said one particular day he went to go and visit his brother, Tim. Excuse me. And on this particular day, his brother Tim had said something very significant to him that ultimately changed his life and his perspective. So we wanted to share this story. So Dr. Baker goes to his brother's house, and he's talking about and he's complaining about his life and all his struggles and his hardships that he's going through. And his brother Tim, per Mr. Baker, Dr. Baker, he's a very calm person. He's a geologist, I believe, which we'll see here in a second. And he just has an overall calm demeanor. So he's listening to his brother, Mark, and responds with the following. You know, Mark, when I was out doing a geological survey recently, I noticed an interesting thing about the way the world is made. Our team climbed up the tallest mountain in the area, and we were exhilarated by the view. Mountaintop experiences are great. However, when you are up that high above the timberline, and the timberline is right above the trees, you can see that trees only grow up to a certain altitude, and above that, they can't survive. On the very top of the mountain, there is no growth. But if you look down, you notice an interesting thing. All the growth is in the valleys. That's a significant perspective on life, a significant way we can take this imagery, take this experience of this geologist and apply it to our everyday lives, that we often think and hope for and look forward to the peaks in our lives. We look forward to when we have all the highs in our lives and all the good things are happening. But in reality, the real growth tends to happen in our valleys, in our low points. So it's something for us to think about when we're going through hardships, that it's actually to help to grow us, to allow us to be transformed, to revolutionize us into something much better, much deeper, more stronger, full of faith, and just to grow us into our best selves, really. And just as a little of finalizing this excerpt from the book, Dr. Baker ends with saying that the meaning he took away from Tim's parable was that suffering feels bad, but it can also lead to growth. So something for us to remember and think about when we are reflecting on our own lives, especially now, the life that we are living, the world that we are living in. You know, life is all about the peaks and valleys, and then oftentimes our most difficult times are during those valleys, during those low points, but that's also where we grow. And nature is a great reflection of God's wisdom and life and how things work. So we can look to nature as lessons. The micro and the macrocosms of the world, we can see it's a direct reflection of the world as we know it today. So something for us to keep in mind, sort of a take-home message as well, for us to think about whenever we're going through our hardships. Remember this story about our peaks and valleys. So diving right into the first parts of this book, Joanna brings to us the following. As usual, she talks about Jesus and reflects about the particular topic she's talking about. So let's dive right in. She says, Jesus always acted as a profound psychologist. People's outward appearance, the way they spoke about their illnesses, or their sentiments were not important to him. When people talk about what is going on inside them, they invariably use words to hide what they would otherwise like to say. People have an unconscious dread of laying themselves bare to themselves, let alone to someone else. Let's stop right there for a second and discuss this a little bit. We know that Jesus was perfect, and we often refer to him as this great psychologist, this greatest therapist, healer, lover of humanity. So, of course, in everything that he did, there was a wisdom behind it. And he understood that it wasn't necessary to listen to what someone says, because as Joanna's bringing to us, that oftentimes people can't really even face themselves, as she's talking about in the second paragraph when she refers to laying yourself bare. Basically is a terminology we use to talk about being completely open to yourself about who we are. And oftentimes that mere aspect of our lives can be very challenging and very difficult. So with that in mind, there are many different perspectives that Jesus had to deal with and he already knew about. She goes on to say that on the other hand, although very few people could be open and honest with who they truly were, on the other end of the spectrum, very few people know how to listen, see, and understand. So on one hand, we have those who are suffering, going through hardships. It's difficult for them to self-reflect and be open. But on the other hand, we also have those who would like to help, but aren't that great at listening, because it is an art form to learn how to truly listen. She goes on to say, a friendly smile at one moment may become a sneer the next, and kindness may turn into violence. Furthermore, listeners receive speakers' projections, adapting the information to their own predicament and their grasp of it to their own areas of conflict. So like that saying, we see in others the reflection of ourselves. So it's difficult sometimes for us to really understand others because we're always using our own personal experiences as references. And so we kind of listen to, or we have selective hearing, and we hear what we think we want to hear or need to hear, and we, based upon our own personal experiences in our own lives, we're not truly hearing what others have to say, but rather our own understanding and our own circumstances in life. She goes on to reflect again about Jesus, and she says, as the perfect man, Jesus, clear in his effective transparency, penetrated people's deepest unconscious mysteries, with which they struggled on the surface of effects without going back to the causes. His dialogues were short and to the point. He used neither circumlocutions nor evasions. When he spoke in parables or used a question to answer a question asked by hypocrites and Pharisees, he was employing an unparalleled technique by which such impostors revealed themselves in their own words. So we can see the dynamic that Jesus used was very profound and perfect in a sense for what was needed at that time. He knew exactly how to deal and look at people in such a way where it wasn't necessary for him to use an abundance of words or questioning. He could just look at you, look deep down into your soul, and know what the issues were. And he didn't stop to listen to what people had to say. Again, because what Joanna reflects on the beginning parts of this chapter, that we often don't share everything because for fear of being entirely open or fear of just being entirely open to ourselves. So Jesus knew how to look into our hearts and our deep unconscious to know what lied beneath. Joanna goes on to say he did this repeatedly. He used it with the priest who asked him about who his neighbor was, which resulted in the parable of the Good Samaritan, leading the priest through logic to the conclusion Likewise, he applied the method with those who asked him if it was lawful to pay taxes, requesting a coin and asking them whose likeness was engraved on it. So again, he used these techniques because he knew the hearts of people and of men and women before him. And he used these techniques to touch their hearts and to awaken them to the reality of what was inside of them and their great abilities, which Joanna will refer to as we go on as well. She goes on to say, it was with sufferers, however, that he employed the best psychotherapy anyone has ever known. And we see this in many interactions that we read about, whether it's in the Bible or in our spiritist literature, in Jesus' interactions with people, with the disciples, and the apostles' experiences as well, and how Christ was able to just look at them and look into their heart and pull out what was necessary. And it always seemed as though Jesus knew so much and could see what lied beneath the surface. So in every aspect of his life, every opportunity, every moment that he had to speak, everything had a purpose, everything had a reason, a rhyme, and everything was meant to help others, whether to grow, to help them to find comfort, to bring healing or self-awareness. He did not probe his patients' dreams to discover their unconscious, their archives, and their psychological shadows. He did not prescribe the usual medications or other complex formulas. He did not make them somatize their stressful issues through accusations of any sort. Instead, he loved them, offering them safety and helping them discover their latent, abandoned abilities. This is something very beautiful because Jesus, even though he was able to look into our heart, to look into our soul, and to see what was really there, even sometimes for us, that might even be scary, acknowledging what is really there. The beauty in all of that was that it's not that he did that to judge us, to focus on something negative, but he looked deep down into our soul and he wanted to bring out something positive, this latent ability within us to love, to heal, to forgive ourselves and others. All of the interactions and the stories we've ever heard about Jesus was always about helping that person find love within themselves, bringing them back to balance and harmony with themselves. Something very interesting we should think about, because our modern day therapists, of course, have to go through many different layers of our personality, of our psyche, in order to fully understand what is going on within us. But Jesus, the therapist par excellence, just could look at you and you were affected by his magnetism, independent of who you were. And he could just reach into your soul and pull out all those latent qualities that were good and help you to bring them out. Excuse me. He awakened in them a new vision of life, supporting them at that moment, but not keeping them from continuing as they so desired. So he never tried to push anyone in one particular direction. He tried to support us, as he still does today. He supports us in being the best version of ourselves, and still allows us to have this free will to choose. He never imposed himself on anyone. He never forced himself. He was very gentle and calm in the ways in which he handled people around him. All sought him, whereas he sought no one. Because the success of any undertaking depends on the interested party. The circumstantial factors are the arena, the space, where they will act. So it was important to note that people sought him out. And it was important that people made that step to seek help. Because it's one thing if we're suffering and going through hardships and just ruminating in our hardships. But what's most important is that we recognize the need for us to go out and get help in whatever fashion, in a positive way, of course, which is most important. The fact that they would come and search for Jesus was also an important part of their healing, as it is today. It is an important part of our own personal healing that we go in search of him. Now, though you might say, well, Jesus is not in Bethlehem anymore. He's somewhere out in this great vast universe, somewhere maybe living on the sun or whatnot. But we still can connect to him. We still have this capability. That is the beauty and the amazing thing about this, as Joanna is sharing with us, what happened at that time when Jesus was on the physical plane. But it still can happen today. It's a big component of our faith, our belief, for us to connect to this and tap into these abilities that we have within us to connect with his higher power, to find balance, to find healing. Joanna goes on to say, it is true that nearly all those who benefited by receiving his liberating light pressed on alone. Many, if not most, were ungrateful. Others fell back into the same web of indolence that made them weak